Hello and welcome to the Audiobook Club. In this week's episode, we're so lucky to be joined by authors Breakfield and Burkey and the fantastic audiobook narrator of titles that includes the Enigma series, Derek Shoales. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining me on the podcast. How are we all today?
Great, thank you very much.
Good, doing good. Thank you.
I, on the other hand, have been highly controversial, so I'm just not coming out of my shell. So.
You're staying guarded. I like it. It's a good tactic. As is tradition on the show, I'd love to start by getting to know you all a little bit better. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about your background, how you came into writing in the case of Breakfield and Burkey, and audiobook narration for Derek? Can we start with our lovely authors?
Sure, and I'm going to start it out because, we're going to do the ladies first thing.
Well,
so by profession, I'm a technologist. So I've worked for several different manufacturers. I've been a subject matter expert. I've written manuals. I've done workshops. And so by way of segueing to your question, all of that is kind of like watching paint dry. And so we decided that writing fictional novels might be more fun.
Yeah, that was the big impetus. We did a couple of high-tech manuals, migrations, and stuff like that. But by the time when they were done, they were out of date. So, I got mad, gathered up my marbles, and stomped off. And she's the one that says, "Come on, come back in the window, back off the ledge. I've got an idea."
Where else can you write stories and have fun and kill people and not go to jail? Nowhere.
Getting your vengeance out.
Yeah, it took us a good while to be able to get even with a lot of the people that have ticked us off over the years. But all of them have met a very gratifying demise. I'll put it to you like that.
And we do still work full time in our respective jobs. So, just kidding. We really do like working and we like the idea of exploring new technology. So, not to get it wrong, but it is more fun to write in our spare time.
Yeah, I get that. Absolutely. Well, I have lots of questions about some of the things that you've just approached. Derek, how about yourself? Can we have a little bit about your background and how you got into narrating audiobooks?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've always had a bit of an acting bug. When I was in high school, I was really studying to be more of like an artist and stuff. And I even went to college for graphic design. But I still remember the first time I was on stage and how the audience responded and stuff. And that was really when I realized I liked acting more. But, my parents are like, yeah, you're going to get a real job. So I ended up going for graphic design. But I still did occasional stage performances and stuff, locally and things like that. A bunch of years passed and I was still like, just practicing here and there until I actually heard about voice acting. And it's funny, you watch cartoons when you're a kid, you hear the radio commercials and the TV commercials, and you never put two and two together. There's an actual person whose job is to actually narrate those things. And I was like, oh my God, that's right, it's true. And you read in, then I started watching, the first movie I watched was, oh God, what was it called? Darn it. It was put together by Joe DiMaggio. I can't remember. It's the one that's about voice acting. And it's great because it peels the curtain back and you get to see all the work that goes into it, the history of it. And I was like fascinated. So I started looking into it, started pursuing it. I took some courses in coaching online at the time. And my first, which at the time I didn't realize was an audiobook, wasn't supposed to be. And I hated it. I hated the whole process. It was a nightmare. I didn't know what I was doing. And I said, hell with this, no. 5 years go by and I'm doing commercial work, e-learning, all that stuff. And my schedule changes from my day job. And I reach out to the Global Voice Acting Academy and I say, hey, what do I do? My schedule's all messed up. I can't do directed sessions now for commercial work. And they said, well, you can consider doing e-learning, which I was already doing, or audiobooks. And I'm like, really? Audiobooks? I still go back to the first contract. So I said, all right, I'll take a look. And they say, go to ACX, take a look. I'm like, all right. So I went there and I started looking. And the very first book I saw was this book two in a series, and it turned out it was the second book in the Enigma series. And I'm reading it and I'm reading the dialogue. It's demo script and I'm starting to chuckle because it's this banter between two brothers. And I'm like, It just sounds hilarious. All right. And I figured, what the hell, I'll do it. So I narrate it. And of course, there's another part too, where it's between two female characters. And I'm like, okay, let's give it a shot. So I dove into some of my character work that I'd done. And surprisingly enough, I booked the dumb thing. I was like, oh my God, seriously? And when I actually knew that it was an audiobook and that I'd actually taken some coaching for how to do it, I actually turned out like that instead of like the garbage of the first 3 that I did without knowing it. This started off and I had a blast with it. And, doing, God, how many books has it been now? 12 in the Enigma series now, I swear. And then, then when I got hooked up by a publisher, it was huge at that point. And then most of my work now is audiobooks. So I rarely do e-learning and corporate stuff. Now it's all like, I'm just booked solid for months ahead for audiobooks now. So yeah, that's where it's kind of gotten to now.
That's fantastic.
I just love seeing those announcements like, okay, here's the next one in the series, in this new series, and I'm like, you, Derek, you go, buddy, you go.
It's funny because in acting, you really don't want to get typecast, and yet you get audiobooks. I'm like, I said to the publisher, the casting director, I'm like, I don't really want to get typecast, And yet, sure enough, I did. So now I do sci-fi, I do thriller, and I do a little RPG. I'm like, you know what? I'm cool with that. That's a good wheelhouse for me. I like it.
That sounds fantastic. There's worse things to be typecast as. I think it's a really, absolutely. So for listeners who are perhaps hearing of the Enigma series for the first time, could you tell us a little bit more about it and where we can get started in listening?
As Derek mentioned, there are 12 books, and there's also now a prequel as of last year called Out of Poland. So the series itself is essentially the cyber good guys, which are called the R group, versus the cyber thugs, which is all of the crackers, hackers, and other sordid characters that might exist somewhere on the planet over the internet. And so we take a concept and we say, okay, identity theft. And that really became the focus of book number 1. And so each book has a primary theme. Are the characters richer if you go through them in order of the series? Yes, because they all grow up and change and do that sort of thing, but it's not necessary. They've really been written so they can be on their own. Yeah.
So to kind of camp onto that, there are different threat vectors from the technology space. Ransomware that's shot at different organizations and cities that basically cripples them. And we take that, that's the subtext for the drama and the backdrop for, the good guys running around trying to figure out where the bad guys are. How are they doing this? How do we stop them? And, the actual dialogue that we build is a lot of stuff that we've done and seen and been in over the years in data centers. And some people we've known gave us that rich background for the dialogue and the character developments, and we have a lot of fun with it. We were on a call with Channel 8 one time when the hostess was chatting with us about about the book series and where do you get your ideas? And I said, well, and your characters. How do you build these characters? And we started off and we said, well, we're always looking for good. Evil characters, evil geniuses, and I actually we're looking for a new evil femme fatale. Do you have a resume, ma'am? And you could hear the laughter in the technicians in the back of the studio. And I said, of course, the caveat is I will need references. And by that time, she's beat red. She's in a pink dress and she's redder than the dress. So we get these spontaneous ideas, and each one of the books has a different flavor, so that it's not the same story, it's not the same formula. Characters, we go through it and bring in new people and shuttle out new people.
Yeah. So the Enigma series covers a plethora of fascinating topics like cybersecurity, AI, cryptocurrency, to name a few. These fields are ever evolving and can be so complex. Do you find it hard, keeping up to date with it all? Does the research ever stop?
So that's why we have our day job, Johnny, is because the research is part of our work.
Yeah, a lot of times it just shows up now. It's like, here you go. All right, here's a new problem. And I was working on one this morning. I'm like, wow, look at this. So that's already percolating through the story memory banks to be able to find its way through to the next book.
Yeah. Have you always been sort of fascinated by, because you must, if working on your day job and then turning it into stories and exploring that even further, has technology and pushing the boundaries of tech always kind of fascinated you?
It is fascinating. What's fascinating for us recently, and I say recently, probably the last 8 years, is the shift from businesses using technology as their mainstay to individuals demanding technology as their mainstay, because there's a lot of security risks with individuals using security. That was pretty politically correct, wasn't it, Derek?
It's close, yeah.
Derek, I'd love to touch upon your pre-production process with accents and character voices to tackle. Could you talk us through your process of developing so many character voices and perhaps your approach to accents as well?
Well, I'll tell you, by this point, I have done quite a few different series and stuff, and none of them has been as demanding as the Enigma series, only because the Enigma series spans the world, and you have you have different genders, different age groups, different economic disparities between people, different nationalities, different beliefs. So when I get a book from them, I basically, the first thing, I obviously have to read the book, because you can't really tell the story right if you don't know how the story is going to go.
Yeah.
And granted, by this point, there's a huge foundation already built upon. So like I know the characters. If we go back to like book 2, which was the very first one I started with, I didn't know these characters at all, and I had the idea I could listen to the first book and how that narrator did it. But I'm like, I really wanted to make the characters kind of my own in a way, not to disrespect it, but there was only one book, and when I talked to the original narrator, he was like, just think of it like it's like in a TV series where you have the pilot episode, and you actually now taking on season 1. And sometimes the actors change. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a cool idea. I like the way that you think about that. So I had to dive into different accents, and thankfully some of them I already had practice with. Like I had a Hispanic accent for a long time because, in our town, there was a large group of guys who came up from Mexico and worked in our town. And they taught me Spanish, some words I shouldn't probably remember, but, and so I really honed it way back at a young age. But when it comes to accents I've never had any exposure to, like when you get to like Polish, or you get, ironically enough, I'm Dutch, but yet I have very little exposure to Dutch accents. So when you get stuff like in the Netherlands, I have to go to websites like the International Dialects of English Archive, which is this massive, massive repository of native speakers just speaking in their own accents from different countries all over the world. And I'll just sit there and listen. So I'll pick and they're grouped by age and by gender. So if the character is described as a male in his 40s from this particular area, like they break it down even to what town these people are from. So I pick the geographic region and I start just listening over and over, and I'm listening for the cadence, the rhythm, the way they say certain vowels, the way they structure the sentences, pauses, things like that. And it's huge because we've gone with characters who are from Japan, from China. We've got characters from Australia, from Romania. We've got characters in the US, South America, Brazil is a huge one. So it's like, and you get into just Hispanic accents alone, God help you, like Puerto Rican versus Cubano versus Brazilian. They're different, and people will tell you if they're different if you don't get it right.
Yeah.
So for me, I have to fixate on the accent to try to get it as accurate as possible. So I read through first, and I put a spreadsheet together if they don't have one for me of the characters, and I look for the main ones that repeat. I also have an MP3 repository on my computer already of every character going back to book 2. So I think when I count, I have over 186, 187 MP3s right now of all of these different characters, because sometimes they'll pop back 2 books later. So I look for see if anybody's recurring. And if there isn't, well, the main cast usually is, although now it's the kids who've taken over versus the adults. So, but they might recur. Then I look for who's the main quote unquote antagonist or the villain, and I look for them and I try to get them developed. Like, what is for lack of a better term, what's their motivation? You know, as goofy as that sounds, it drives how you voice it. And now, not to keep on going too long here, but there was one book, and I can't remember if it was book 6 or book 7, where he was this guy he was this I think it was German, but he was trying to get one of their characters, Su Lin, who was Chinese type of security, to work with her to try to resolve this disease he had. And when I read through the book, I was picturing him as this cold, non-emotional character. So when I first started, I was writing notes and I'm like, okay, he's unemotional. He views human beings as nothing more than tools. But then it got to this, like 2/3 of the way through the book. And there's this scene that he's not technically in it, but the main characters are reviewing this like VCR tape of him doing an interview from like the 80s. And he, in the video, is blowing up at this person in the audience. And I stopped and I'm like, wait a minute. If he's unemotional, if has no care about, he wouldn't have blown up. He wouldn't be gripping the podium and ready to rip it apart. And that changed the whole viewpoint of my character. It's like, he actually is a very passionate person, but it's because he's passionate for himself. He's passionate to drive his own goals, ambitions, and he'll do and say whatever it takes to get his way. And that completely changed like the first intro, which is between him and Su Lin, and how I had to deliver it. And it's my favorite. It's one of my favorite chapters of the whole book. Is just the intro between him and Su Lin, and it's like, I love it. I even use it for like audition stuff too, because it's like, I just loved it. But it's that thing where if you don't read it, you have no idea. You don't write down who the characters are and what they do and what they're like. You have no idea how to narrate them, and it's going to be a disconnect between you and the audience. And they're going to be like, well, wait, that's not what I thought. That doesn't make sense. And I wanted to try to be as accurate as possible to what their motivations are, to their physical description, and to their nationality. I want to be as true as possible to all of that. And it's pretty much the main core of it. And it's just, spend the time making sure the accents are right, making sure I record the samples, and just get it down.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. I find that the whole process of inhabiting a character and letting the character sort of lead the narration rather than you leading it, if that makes sense. I find that all really interesting. It really does highlight the art form behind the narration process.
You were talking, and it made sense because there was another one that actually Roxanne Charles pointed out to me, and it kind of ties into exactly what you're saying. And it was a throwaway character, one character in the book, and he was a vet. He was on the street. He was a homeless vet in the streets, and he was just like an informant. Nothing big. Nobody who cared. But and I got to those point, and I started to. And this kind of ties to exactly what you're saying: the character and habit. The most important, the most believable character is one that clearly has a story, even if the story isn't told. And when I started reading this chapter, I'm like, well, why is this guy homeless? He's a vet. What did he do? What was he in? Was he in a war? Did he lose? And I started to build this whole story about this guy. Just this one little character. He was like in 2 or 3 chapters. And I had already decided he had been in Afghanistan. He had served for 3 tours, but the Hummer he was in was hit with an IUD, and most of his team he was hit was killed, but he managed to get ruled out, but he lost a leg. But the PTSD when he went back to the States affected him. He lost his family, he lost his wife, he couldn't hold down a job because of sound, and he ended up being homeless. So to get to that point now, because he obviously wanted to be an informant, he was helping the cops in spite of what could happen to him. So clearly there was a core of honesty and integrity. But what would happen to cause him to get to this point? And that's what really drove it. And I remember they were shocked by just a simple performance. But
it was stellar.
Yeah.
That was in the Enigma Gamers, and he is a wonderful little vet.
Yeah.
That's in there. And the other one you were talking about, remarkably enough, Derek, is one that we just released as a 2nd edition. That was Enigma Always, and Xavier. Xavier is that wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Xavier.
Yeah. To be fair, we don't just throw the book at Derek and say, "Have a nice day," we do. I do exactly what we think he's going to need. Okay, this is a throwaway character. This is you got this voice characterization back in book number yada yada. And here's an important character, and maybe some of the flavoring for some of the voices that you're going to have to build, so that you're not going in, without any coaching. I guess is part of the way.
And you also provide pronunciations too as well. It also helps that I have some experience in IT as well. So some of the stuff I'm like, okay, cool. But you might have a particular, because I know different fields of IT have different pronunciations of different things, like IP, or, could be any, like, SMTP, there could be some kind of an acronym pronunciation. You guys have it different versus what I'm used to. So that's one of those critical files as well that I usually get per book.
Now, every once in a while, what we'll do is we'll have a section where it's like, okay, Derek, here's the scene. You may indulge yourself. And so we're looking for him to be able to provide that. How would you present the scene? So those are always quite surprising and quite enjoyable.
Yeah, it sounds like a great setup. To be fair, that sounds really interesting. I'd love to know more about your writing process. With there being two of you, how do you structure your writing? Is there a word count split evenly? Is one more the ideas generator? How does it work?
Well, we've got we use a patent pending technique called literary ping pong. And so what we do is I'll wake up, in a desperately out of breath, saying, I know what I'm going to write next. And I'll whack on a chapter, and then I'll ship it over to her, and she'll take a look at it. And either one or two things will happen. Either it's like, okay, we can work with this, or are you not taking your meds again? Come on, man. I mean,
so we actually rough out stories, at least a good portion of them, and we kind of divide chapters up between one of us being the primary writer and one of us being the secondary writer. And we do go back and forth with them because we're not even in the same houses. So, we write different segments. His wife does the editing for us. So, we go back and forth, and the literary ping pong is really very true. There are other fibs in what he said, but we're not going to go there. But we try and smooth it out at the end, so it sounds only like one voice. And I think Derek's been surprised before because it doesn't sound like multiple people necessarily.
Yeah. Even once in a while, the editor will say, "Who wrote this?" And I'm like, "Yes." So we won't answer because it gets that polishing effort. It gets the her hands, my hands on it, our thought processes. Is the character built the way they want? Is the scene unfolding the way it needs to for the next hook, the next portion of the story? So it's very collaborative. Sometimes very exciting and very dynamic.
Do you find it difficult, kind of, so aiming for that main one voice for the story? Do you find it difficult in that process of polishing and making it sound one voice, or is it just something that comes naturally as a team?
No, it's difficult. It just is, because even when you write by yourself, you'll write one way on one day and you'll write another way on a different day.
Right.
And at some point in time, it has to be smoothed, whether it's by your editors or whatever happens to it. We have the same kind of thing going back and forth. We don't write the same every day. We write every day, but it's just not the same. Yeah,
I get you. Your latest novella, Out of Poland, also narrated by Derek, which is handy, is currently available for pre-order. I believe it's releasing in August this year. Is that right?
It'll be releasing on our website in August of this year. It's actually available right now on another platform.
Right.
But on our own website, we're trying to release the books on our own website.
Yeah. Okay.
Right now we're in a finalist category for that Audible and the Roan Awards. Again, we're so. I'll just go ahead and put the moose on the table. We're so proud of the work that Derek does. With our properties that we'll submitting to the every competition that we find. We know this is a good property, and we've been able to share some very good wins with his talent.
We have.
So it's funny.
been
It's always
finalists.
funny when I get an email like that.
We've been finalists in the Here Now with Derek. So we all took a trip to Kansas City, which was kind of different and exciting. He's run a Roan Award for The Enigma Stolen. So now we're up for another one that we hope to win with Out of Poland.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But
Well,
there's some surprises where we send you announcements and go, hey, by the way,
Yeah.
I
It's
love
always out of
that.
left field too. I love it. It's like, wait, what? What are we up for now? Wait, who, what? Like,
I love that comment. Wait, what? I am? We did? No kidding.
yeah.
Well, a huge congratulations to your previous wins, and also obviously fingers crossed for you this time. I mean, it must be incredibly rewarding as well to know that people are taking notice of the hard work that you're all putting in.
it is wonderful, actually.
Going back to Out of Poland, could you tell us a little bit about what we can find in that story if we haven't purchased it yet? What we can look forward to in that story?
Well, what happened with that one is it was actually, we wrote it with the idea that it was a backstory for the R group. Where did they come from? We had somebody say, where did these people come from? I mean, this is, you say, the Enigma machine, but so we take it all the way back to Poland, 1939, when the Germans invade Poland, and they basically blow through in like 21 days, or 30 days. And we postulated that their communications encryption device, called the Enigma machine, was the prize that these three Polish nationalists steal. And then their job is to get out of Poland with it to get it to the Allies. So that's the premise for it. And then that is the beginning of the R group. They see that, okay, tyranny just doesn't end with this event. It's going to be something we're going to fight through our lives. We will teach our children to do that. And by the third generation, which is the current day R group, this is their heritage, and this is why they're so passionate about fighting the cyber bad guys.
yeah.
So it is a historical fiction. So it is a deviation from the thrillers that we write in the series itself, Johnny, to be honest with you. So it is a bit different. So there are some historical facts in there. There's some historical embellishment in there. But a lot of it's very realistic to the time and place in Poland in 1939.
Yeah.
Sounds
so
fun.
that's sort of prequel to the R group. And so when we put that together, we also tinkered with toyed with the concept of turning it into a screenplay. And so we have that we're still shopping here and there, looking for interested parties that might be curious about how to be able to take a historical fiction, put it on screen.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Wow, there's a lot of exciting things in the works there. All of the links and information and things will be available in the show notes. So I really suggest that the listeners do go forth and check that out. A lot of our audience happen to be budding audiobook narrators, some in their early stages of their career. Derek, your glowing testimonials and reviews, they speak for themselves. What would you say to narrators just starting out in order for them to leave the best impression possible with project rights holders, casting teams, and authors such as our lovely ones who are with us today?
A couple things. First off, don't consider yourself just a narrator. You're a voice actor. This is acting. So you need to be able to act. So you need to be able to take words that aren't yours and make them your own. Because if you don't, then all you're doing is just reading words. And anybody can do that, sure. But what really gets people's attention, makes them leave comments that they loved it, or even that they hated it, because guess what? It's acting, and you're going to get people that love and hate you because this is people, So you have to have a very thick skin. But if you really want to get into it and are serious, first treat it like it's requires training, and it does. This is it requires a lot of endurance. I typically say when I'm talking to new authors, you're looking at a 4-to-1 ratio. To actually produce an audiobook, it's going to take you 4 hours for every one finished hour. So if it's like a 10-hour audiobook finished, you're going to be spending 40 hours on this piece. So that's not even really including research time either. So you've got to be able to handle that consistent Keep the narration voice consistent throughout the whole story. Make sure that the characters are consistent throughout the whole story. Do your research so that you don't have listeners going, that's supposed to be, you know, Italian and it sounds like it's Australian. What the, this is a garbage, you know? And I always encourage people, if you are serious, seek out a coach. I've worked with about 3 different coaches, and each one for different types of audiobooks, one for nonfiction, one for fiction, and one for character performances. There's a lot of them out there. Always look for somebody who actually has experience, and it's easy. Just go to Audible, search for the narrator, and see how many books they've got. You know, I have 71, but I know some that have over 1,000, and those are the people that you really want to learn from. So I would say those are the key things. Take it seriously. It's not just a hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. When it comes to post-production, is that something you tackle as well, or do you outsource to other people?
Not anymore. When I first started, I did it because I do like to have experience, so I understand what goes into it. But as things started to pick up, you know, like I just found that there was no way for me to be able to meet deadlines effectively if I'm narrating, then proofing it, because you have to proof it. And that's running it through, comparing to the manuscript, making sure you're not mispronouncing things, turning 2 separate words into contractions, making sure you're not missing whole words or sentences, because that can happen. And I never encourage people to do it themselves. A lot of people will say, oh yeah, sure, it saves you money. Well, the problem is it'll cause more work because you're used to your own voice. You're used to the way you speak. And you need somebody who isn't you to be able to say, hold on, you didn't say this right. This is the pronunciation, or this is the word. So there's a proofer, and I'll send it off to them. So I always schedule them out. They send me back the corrections. So I get like a spreadsheet of, you know, here's a page of the PDF. This is the word or the phrase you said. This is what you're supposed to say. And then this is the time. And a lot of times I'll get like an MP3 of my recording so I can get the proper tone. And then I'll record the corrections. And then I send it to a producer who's a separate person. Well, sometimes it is. But there's one guy I work with who does both. And then he'll take those and he'll actually put them in, place them into the auto corrections. That way, cleans it up so there's no background artifacts. Usually I try to keep in a clean room myself, so I don't have too much like static or, you know, clicking or stuff like that. But really, when I do an audiobook nowadays, it's a 3-person team, unless it's for a publisher. Like if I'm doing stuff for Tantor or Gildan, actually, no, it's Ascent now, or one of those guys, they have their own proofers and producers. So all I do is just the narration. And then I just wait for them to send me the corrections back.
It's a game changer, outsourcing post production, isn't it?
It's like, and if you do it, you got to make sure to budget that into, because you know when I first did that, I didn't take that into account, so I took it out of my own narration rate. Nowadays, it's like, you know, when people look at it, think, oh, that's a lot of money. I said, not really, because you're not paying for the production time, you're paying for the final run time, and you're paying for 3 people basically. So they're like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense now. Like I want to give you the best quality. One person, I'm a narrator. I'm not an audio engineer. Like you want somebody who's skilled in that to give you that quality and that skill and that attention.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's a whole other profession. Just to Rux and Charles, when casting for your books, what is it that you are? I know you're working with Derek now, but if we can role play to before, when casting for your books, what is it that you're looking for in a narrator? This could be in their performance, or perhaps even the way that they communicate with you. What are you looking for out of that business relationship?
Well, we started off with here's a sample of what here's a good example of what is going to be in the book. Your voice ranges. I mean, are you are you good with this? Are you, to Derek's point, are you reading the words and not emotion out of it? Or are you living the character? Are you making, when we're listening to his chapters he sends through to us, it is amazingly different than what we wrote. And it's like, give me my popcorn. I want to hear that again. What's the next one coming through? I mean, if it doesn't get you that extra dimension that you didn't know that was coming. Because this isn't different media. This isn't written. This is spoken, and this is not. And to Derek's point, it's acted. And so, if you don't get that, and we got that from Derek, Dave, from the first sample, and we were like, okay. The other 2 people, tell them thank you very much. But
well, actually, it was 4 people. And so you'll get demos when you take a look at the background of a narrator. You'll get demos from them based on the content that you send. And as Charles says, there has to be a variety. And that's good. And we get samples and all that. The other element that's important, though, is a partnership.
Mhm.
So this is an actual perfect example of that partnership. I felt comfortable giving you Derek's contact information to see if he'd like to join this show. And we have done these kinds of things before because we are a partnership overall. If we do well, he does well, he gets recommended. And so that's how you build good partnerships and good collaborative relationships with people.
Yeah.
And so that's important, as well as, the stellar narration and voice acting that he does.
Agreed.
And if I can make one comment too, for authors, trust the narrator. Like, trust that they're going to give you the best that they can get. If you listen, like Rock said, if you listen to 4, 5, 6 narrators, and the one you like, you pick them. There's a reason you picked them. If you start nitpicking and trying to direct into every chapter, you're taking an actor out of it, and you're just turning them into a machine. And you're not going to get a performance. And you don't want melodrama. You don't want somebody acting to the back row. But there's a balance. And if they're trained and if they take it seriously, like Rock said, you're going to be shocked, because they're going to give you a performance you didn't expect, you didn't think of, because you've inhabited these characters, but maybe you missed something that you wrote that they picked up on and now turn that into the character. And it's a core element. So that's my one big thing that I hear in groups all the time: trust the narrator, work with them. Like you said, make it a partnership. You hired a professional, let them be a professional.
That's one of the things we learned in the screenplay writing efforts we've been doing. Not to put too many demands on the host. Basically say, that's why sometimes we'll put that comment in the note sheets that I send you. Please indulge yourself here. Give us your interpretation, because I want to see what you can do. So that's good counsel. Trust the narrator.
Yeah.
I guess it's like really like leaning into that collaboration aspect of all working together, all, in your different suits and things. Yeah. It makes it a pleasure, I guess. So we do just have time for one more question, which I'll open to everyone. And it's been such a pleasure to talk to you all. To finish us off, is there any upcoming projects, anything approaching in the diary that you're excited about? Perhaps a new book in the pipeline? You mentioned the screenplay there. Is there anything there we can perhaps look forward to?
Well, Derek, we haven't called you yet, but the new book is with the printer right now. So yes,
All right.
The Flower Enigma is
Okay. Nice.
is our next book that's coming out. We do need to talk with you about it. It's different too. It's part of a crime mystery series. So it's a little different flair, but you will have a couple of characters you've met before. So
okay, cool. Look forward to it. And as far as me, I Tantor keeps me busy. I currently have a nonfiction title about cryptocurrency, which is actually a collection of essays written by, I can't remember his first name, but it's Buterin, who was the inventor of Ethereum.
Okay.
And especially with everything that's happened recently, it's actually a fascinating read to see, because it goes back a couple decades to when he first started writing about it. And it's interesting to see that perspective and where we're at now with crypto. But also there's the Underdog series that I've been narrating now since, I think we're on book 7 or 8 of that with Tantor. That's going to have another one coming soon. And I'm now in the process of doing another, Tom Anderley, I think, is the narrator. I'm the author for the System Apocalypse, his lit RPG series. He's done a couple of good ones that I've really enjoyed. So those will be coming up soon too.
Sounds great. Sounds like you're all keeping pretty busy. That just about does it for this episode of the Audiobook Club. All of the relevant links to social media accounts, websites where you can learn more about the Enigma series will be linked in the description and the show notes. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day, and another huge thank you to Breakfield and Burkey and Derek for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having